Recently, I was giving a message, and I said in my message that something was a sin. And afterwards, in kind of a question and answer, somebody's like, well, I don't see that written. And I was really surprised by this because I thought it was cut and dry. I thought it was very simple. I thought everybody was in agreement on this. But I was getting pushback, and it was basically, if I don't see it written, it's not a sin. And I also get asked questions quite often, hey, preacher, can I do such and such? Hey, preacher, can I talk on my phone on the Sabbath? You know, I am not the standard. Jeff Lockhart is not the standard. So if you get my approval, it means nothing, okay? So I don't even know why people ask me, because I'm going to point them back to the standard. I'm going to point them back to the Bible. And so people ask me, where is it written? So I'm going to tell you today that sometimes it is a sin to say thank you. Really? Where is that written? Sometimes it is a sin to sweep a walkway. Really? Where is that written? I'm going to show you. Those are some of the things we're going to cover today. So my title today is Sin, Law, and Free Will. Sin, Law, and Free Will. Because if people want to know what's a sin, we're going to look into that. We're going to look at what is the law, but we have to ask ourselves, when did the law get created? And that was touched on a little bit in our first message today. When was the law created? The reason this is important is because some people want it to be finite. If the law has a start, if the law began on a certain date, then they can start looking for when's the expiration date. It started here, when's it going to end? So we'll look at that as well. And we're also going to look at the concept is the law only what is written? Or is it more than what is written? And how does free will fit into all this? Does free will give us the right to sin? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Last night, Mr. Smith sent out his Sabbath greeting, and one of the scriptures that really stood out to me was when he quoted Psalm 119 and verse 34. Psalm 119 and verse 34. It says there, give me understanding. Give me understanding. And isn't that what children always want? You tell them to do something, you tell them not to do something, they say, why? Why? So David, or the author here of this particular psalm, wanted to know, give me an understanding, because if I can understand your law, then I can more perfectly keep it. And I shall keep your law. Indeed, I shall observe it with my whole heart. That's a summary of my whole message today. Think about that when I get to my conclusion. So, what is the law and when was it first used? I did a word search for things like commandment. Commandments kind of late in Genesis. Statutes kind of late. The word law, not until like Genesis 34, something like that. And it's funny, the word, actually no, it's later than that. Because it's actually talking about how Joseph said something and Pharaoh made it a law. So the actual first instance of the word law in the Bible happens to do with Pharaoh. But is there an indication that there had to be a law before then? What about Genesis 4? Genesis 4 and verse 7. What we get here is Cain and Abel brought offerings before God. And Abel's offering was accepted, Cain's was not. And God told Cain, if you do well, won't you be accepted? But if not, then sin lies at your door. Sin? Hold on. How can we get sin? Some people say that there wasn't even a written language when this was happening. So how could there be a written law that he was transgressing? I actually disagree with that. I think God actually did teach humankind lots of things in those early days. I don't believe in evolution where they had to discover everything for themselves. But they were taught what was right, what was wrong. And Cain's attitude with his offering was wrong. It was against God. And God said, "You're sinning." Another example comes in Genesis 6. Genesis 6 and verse 5. I've added some additional words here. I've added some definitions. It says here, "Then the Lord saw that the wickedness." I'm sorry, if there's no law, how can there be wickedness? What is wickedness? Depravity, corruption of the heart. This is the second scripture I've gone to that talks about the heart. Corruption of the heart, active immorality. This was what was happening on the earth, and God was sick of it. That the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent and the thoughts of his heart was only evil. What's evil? Evil is harmful, causing ruin, causing injury, causing pain. In their heart was the desire to cause pain continually. It's evil. It was a sin. And I can't point to a written law before this time period that they were breaking. So let's continue to look at this concept. What is the law? So I want to turn now to Mark 12. Mark 12 and verse 30. Jesus, when he was on earth, was asked, "What is the greatest commandment?" And in Mark 12 and verse 30, it says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and with all your strength." He was asked what was the greatest commandment. He said, love. Love God. He wasn't asked what is the two, but he went on. In the next verse, it said, this is the first commandment, the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love man. Notice what I have underlined here. There is no other commandment greater than these. There's no greater commandment than love. In Matthew, he gives a similar account, and in Matthew 22, verse 40, it says, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So I asked the question, when did the law start? Now I'm going to ask you the question, when did love start? When was the beginning of love? We have a loving Father that created us and gave us things like the Sabbath. We saw in our first message today, is there any expiration date on that love? On that wanting to get together and spending time with our eternal Father? That one-on-one time, is there an expiration date on that? Should there be an expiration date on when we love our neighbor as ourselves? You ever going to stop loving yourself? No. So what is love? Let's look at 1 Corinthians 13:4. God's law is love. What is love? If God's law is love, what is love? 1 Corinthians 13 and verse 4. I'm going to read this in my Bible here. I didn't bring up my glasses. Okay, I'm going to have to hold the Bible a little bit further away from me. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up. Love does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 and 5 and verse 6. Does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Next verse. Love never fails. There is no expiration date on love. Therefore, there can be no expiration date on the law. I was at the store this week, and I had 1 dozen eggs. I had to take a loan out. I don't know about you guys, but I had sticker shock when I bought my dozen eggs yesterday. $4.99. Don't know if you've got it at a higher price, but $4.99 for a dozen eggs. And I got up there and thank you, I put my eggs on the conveyor belt, and I waited. I like to put the little divider between my groceries and the next person's. But they don't always push it far enough forward. And so I was having to do a little waiting, as being patient. And finally, I felt like I could get to the divider to put behind my egg so that the next person could put their stuff on the cart. I thought I could finally do that without invading the personal space of the person in front of me. And the lady behind me goes, "Thank you." Yeah. I don't think she was suffering long. I think I had been frustrating her because by the time my eggs got up to that point, half the conveyor belt was empty. And she thought I was being rude because I had not put the divider there. And she was not going to put her stuff on there until the divider was there. So once I put it there, she started huffing and puffing, putting the stuff down on the conveyor belt, with a thump. So when is it a sin to say thank you? When you do it rudely? When you do it in a passive-aggressive manner? When you loudly explain to the person behind you, "Here, let me get a divider so that you can put your stuff on the cart," which she did. She was telling the person behind her that she was, "Look at me going to all this extra effort to put the divider here so that you can quickly put your stuff on the conveyor belt." Yeah, not talking to me, but talking to me. So it's odd, right? If I was to get up here and say it's a sin to say thank you, in context, you can do the right thing for the wrong reasons. You can do the right thing, but if you do it for the wrong reasons, it's unloving. It's unloving. It doesn't show love to your neighbor. Now, I really did feel bad about it. I did not know what was going on behind me until she said, "Thank you." I did not know what was going on because I am one of those people, I love putting the divider there. But I wasn't going to push the lady in front of me out of the way so I could get to it. So, when is it wrong to say thank you? Let's turn to James 4 and verse 13. Because there's all kinds of things that, if you're done for the wrong reasons or done the wrong way, can be considered a sin. It can be considered unloving, and therefore a transgression of the law. So James 4:13 here says, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go and search out a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit." Okay, sounds like a business plan to me. We're going to gather our information. We're going to find out where the market is. We're going to find out what the needs are. We're going to provide that need. We're going to make a profit. What could possibly be wrong with this? I mean, now, I've just jumped into the scripture. I haven't given you any context, but James is mad. This is a corrective passage. This is not a good thing that he's about to say. What? Why is he upset with somebody creating a business plan? Where in the Bible does it say creating a business plan is a sin? Is he making it up? Let's go to the next verse. Verse 14. "Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away." Okay. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. That's important to know. Verse 15. "Instead, you are to say, if the Lord wills, we shall do this or do that." Now we're getting to the crux of the matter. They weren't putting God first. Remember, love God, love your neighbor. They weren't including God in their plans. They were putting themselves above God. They were boasting. We'll see that in just a second. They were boasting. It was all about them, what they were going to do. What did we see in 1 Corinthians? Love doesn't boast. Love is not puffed up. And so it wasn't the fact that they had plans. It was the fact that they were not including God. They were not giving God the glory for their success. At the end of this year, when they made a profit, they were going to pat themselves on the back. God wasn't a part of this. They weren't showing love to God. Let's go to the next verse. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So it wasn't the business plan that was the problem. It was the boasting that was the problem. That was what was evil. Let's go to verse 17. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is a sin. This is broad. You know, people want a written law. There's advantages to a written law. If there's a written law, then I can go to it and say, this is what I'm allowed to do, this is what I'm not allowed to do. There's no confusion. This is broad. If you know to do good and you don't do it, to you it is a sin. I don't know that I'll ever recognize that woman again, but if I happen to be back at that store and that woman's behind me, I'm going to make an extra effort to get that divider up there quicker. Because if I didn't, if I said, oh, that's her again, she's not getting a divider at all today. We're just going to let my eggs go all the way down. To me, that would be a sin. Oh, where in the Bible can you find that if you don't put a divider on a conveyor belt, it is a sin? Here, this is where it is written. You know, the Bible is timeless. And scriptures like this is what makes it timeless. Paul didn't have to mention, Jesus didn't have to mention, God didn't have to mention dividers and conveyor belts, did he? He gave us principles to live by. Love your neighbor. Love God. I worry when someone insists that it has to be written down. Where is it written that that's a sin? Because if they only do it because it's written, are they doing it for the right reasons? Are they doing it for the right reasons? My previous affiliation, we used to keep the Sabbath. We used to tithe. We used to not eat clean and unclean meats. And then that organization changed all that. And there were people that I'd gone to church with week after week that started having shrimp, started having pig, started going to church on Sunday because they couldn't find where it was written anymore. They thought it had all been done away with. They thought the law had an expiration date. And so because they weren't doing it for the right reasons, they couldn't find where it was written. They were blinded to where it was written. Jeremiah 31:33. This is the answer. This is the final answer to where is it written. I will put my law within them. I will write it on their hearts. How many scriptures have we gone to today that has the heart? We started in Psalm 119, where it said, give me understanding and I will obey you with all my heart. We saw in Genesis where their heart was corrupt. I will write it in their hearts, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Is it a sin to sweep a sidewalk? Well, as it turns out, I live on the 3rd floor. And there's a little walkway that goes past my door, and the apartment complex pays someone once a week to come sweep that. And she just sweeps it off the balcony, right off the 3rd floor, where it drifts right onto all the cars below us. She gets paid to sweep, she swept. Is it a sin? Well, where is it written? Where is it written that you shouldn't be putting dust on people's clean cars? It should be written in her heart. It should be written in my heart. It should be written in your heart that you don't do things that are unloving. That's where you should go look. Is this action loving or is this action unloving? Is it selfish? Am I only doing this for me? I'm not doing it for the benefit of the other person. This is why, again, the law is written, and it's also a concept. It's spiritual. We know that. How many times have we read where Christ said, "It is written that you shall not commit adultery, but I tell you that if you even lust for someone, that you've committed adultery with them in your heart." This is why the Bible doesn't have to have a section that says, "Thou shalt not speed." Because speeding is unloving to other people and it's unloving to you. It can be dangerous. Let's look at, we've looked at what is the law. It is love. We've looked at when was the law. It's eternal. Let's look at what is sin. What is sin? See if there's a little bit more we can flesh out here. So let's go to 1 John chapter 3 and verse 4. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 4. Whoever commits sin also commits lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness, or sin is being without the law. Sin is being without love. Sinning is being without love. Other translations say the transgression of the law. Some say it's doing something unloving. Another way of translating this word is saying that it misses the mark. It misses the mark. And so we are striving for perfection. God says, "I am holy, you should be holy." Now we know that we all sin. We've all fallen short. Does that mean we give up? No, it means we keep trying to, the next time we do better. The next time we do better. So we're going to continue to move towards that. There's a game I've heard of recently called The Floor is Lava. The floor is lava. Where I guess you jump around from couch to chair and you don't touch the floor, because if you touch the floor, well, it's lava. God has given us a straight and narrow path. He has given us his book. He has given us his guidelines. He's given us a very clear path. It's like a bridge over an ocean of lava. Yeah. Sinning is missing the mark. Sinning is getting off the path. Sinning is not sticking to the standard. So I had given this message again recently. I think I have enough time, so I might go into it in just a second. And again, it just seems so odd to me that some people came to me afterwards and said, "Oh, you said that was a sin. It's not a sin." And I'm like, God himself set the standard, and you're telling me that you want to do something that's not in the standard. How is that right? Why should I be the one that has to come to you and say, "Well, here it's written, thou shalt not do this"? It misses the mark. It's off the standard. It's off the path. And if you get off the path is lava. What do we call it? The lake of fire. We call it the lake of fire. It was funny, a couple of years ago, I remember a congressperson, I'm not going to mention names, a congressperson went to Congress. And this person wanted to show how corrupt Congress was. And so in this person's first month or two, they asked for these committee hearings and asked for people to come. And they asked these questions. Is it okay for a congressperson to do this? And they're like, "Well, yeah, you actually could." And, everybody at home is like, "Oh, that would be horrible if a congressperson did that." It was all about insider trading and making money off of being a congressperson. All the loopholes of Okay, well, I don't invest in this, but my husband could invest in this. Oh, yeah, that would be fine if your husband invested in stuff that you're voting on. There's no conflict of interest there. And so it was all under the guise of, I want to expose corruption. But it still had that flavor of, my friends told me it was okay to do this. I just want to make sure the policeman tells me it's okay. Because once the policeman tells me it's okay, woo, I know what I'm going to do. Yeah, it goes back to what Mr. Smith said earlier about the Sabbath, putting a hedge around it. And just because something is allowable, Paul goes into this, just because something's allowable doesn't mean that it's expedient. It doesn't mean that it is for your best interest. It's not in the best interest of others, just because something is allowable. Terms and conditions. Terms and conditions. We all have clicked that box, accepting the terms and conditions. Do you ever read them? A couple of years ago, this family in England had posted some pictures to something like Flickr or some type of online photo storage thing. And then they took a vacation to Australia. And Coca-Cola was using their family pictures to advertise Coca-Cola in Australia. And they're driving down the road and they're like, hey, look, that's us. This is weird. What's going on? Turns out the terms and conditions, when you put your photos in the storage, you no longer own your photos. You are giving the rights to your photos to this third-party storage facility, and they had sold it to Coca-Cola. And so Coca-Cola had bought the rights to use that for advertising. The family got zero. Yeah. Is that right? It's legal. Is that right? Another one came up today, and this one's definitely baffling to me. Cryptocurrency. You get these electronic coins. It's basically just a string of numbers. And you can put it yourself on a thumb drive. You can put your electronic coin on a thumb drive. You can even print it out on a piece of paper. As long as you can type it in later, it is yours and you've got it safe. But a lot of people are afraid their thumb drive's going to die, and it's like, I don't know, it's 10,000 characters, so who wants to type all that in? So they'll put their cryptocurrency, if they own any, into a wallet, an electronic wallet that somebody else controls. Well, there was this company that kind of started out as a wallet, but they actually just started saying that they were an investment company. And hey, if you actually use our wallet, we'll get you 20% on your investment. Well, that doesn't work in any industry. You can't get 20% year after year in any industry. That's a fraud. And so people started wanting their money back, and they said, no, we're not going to give you your money back. And they actually said, did you guys read the terms and conditions? When you put it in the wallet, it actually became ours. It was no longer your cryptocurrency. It was no longer your coin. Wow. We're talking something in the billions of dollars, or maybe about $4 billion that has been deposited with this company, and they're like, no, that wasn't yours. You gave it to us. We don't have to give it back. Obviously, there'll be lawsuits on this. But it's written. Is it a law? Is it a sin? I would certainly say it's unloving. I would certainly say it's unloving. So let's talk about free will in the time that we have left here. Because everybody wants to do, what about Bob? Well, what about, you're telling me that this is a sin, but King David did it. So-and-so did it. Adam and Eve did this. So it's the whataboutums. God gives us free will. God gives us free will. It's very important. Free will is a very important part of our makeup and why God built us the way he built us. God wants us to be loving. And he could have programmed us to be loving. Just like he gives animals instincts. Just like he gives ants the instincts to build tunnels. He could have given us the instinct to love. He wanted us to choose love. It's important that love is written in our heart. Because if it's written in our heart, we're choosing to love God, we're choosing to love our neighbor, then it can never be erased. We can never be talked out of it. We'll never change our mind because we have chosen this. And so God has allowed people to do certain things that were wrong when he absolutely could have stopped them. You know, when Adam and Eve took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God kicked them out of the Garden of Eden and put an angel there with the flaming sword. Why wasn't the angel with the flaming sword guarding the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? He could have prevented them from eating that fruit. But he gave them free will because he wants them to choose life. And so we have to, when we get to the kingdom, when we get to Revelation 22, where we have the new heaven and the new earth and there is no more night, and the people that are in the kingdom are those who chose to love. And outside are those who are still doing their falsehoods, their evil, their sins, their transgressions, their selfishness. That's who's outside the kingdom. But inside the kingdom are those who have exercised free will. So I still have time. I'm probably right at my 35, but we haven't gotten to 12 o'clock yet. So what was it that I said was a sin, now that we have all this framework to deal with? God's law is love. Love is eternal. Sin is the transgression of the law. Sin is unloving. What was it that I said was a sin and somebody argued with me about? I gave a sermon that said that marriage is between one man and one woman. And I emphasized that over and over again. And that was really all I said. Marriage is one man and one woman. Afterwards, somebody said, well, what about polygamy? Is that okay? I'm like, no, that's a sin. And like, where's it written? Because again, and then all the whataboutyas popped up. What about King David? What about this person? What about that person? Okay, let's wrap this up. Let's put a bow on it. What did God say when he instituted marriage in Genesis 2? In Genesis 2 and verse 24, God said, I guess I don't have this one. I want to make sure I get it right. Thank you for my glasses. Wait, they're not in there. I'd already taken them out. All right, Genesis 2 and verse 24. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to them together with his wife, and they shall become one flesh. He didn't say with his wife and his other wife and his other wife that they become one. Now, let's look at Mark 10, because Jesus quotes this, but adds a little. So, Mark 10 and verse 6. Mark's chapters are long. Mark 10 and verse 6. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. That was Mark chapter 10, verse 8. He didn't say the three become one flesh, or the four, or the six become one flesh. He defined it as one man, one woman. It's the standard, it's the path. Remember, the floor is lava. If you get off the path, you're not following the standard. This is not Jeff's standard. I didn't create one man, one woman. God, our Creator, created the standard. So when people ask me, Jeff, can I have 3 wives? I'm not going to give you the okay. I'm going to point you back to the standard. I'm going to point you back to the standard. Let's look at another verse, because this was something that somebody brought out to me. Deuteronomy 21. Deuteronomy 21. And we're going to look at verse 15. Deuteronomy 21:15. If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and they have borne children to him. So I guess I had this one. There's nowhere it says if a man has two wives and they're both loved. Notice God's assumption here is that if you have two wives, one of them is going to be loved and one of them is going to be unloved. What did we learn about the law today? The law is love. God would not want a situation. It is not an ideal situation where going into it, someone's going to be preferred over the other one. Somebody's going to be a favorite. Someone's going to be more loved. And someone's going to be treated badly. So God gives us free will. There are things that God allows. It doesn't mean that they're okay. There are consequences for our actions. Free will is not a free pass. Adam and Eve had free will. They got kicked out of the garden. If I speed, I'll probably get a speeding ticket. There is a consequence for me breaking that law. We're also told, and it's funny that this should be even brought up, that render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. In other words, obey man's laws unless they contradict God's laws. And so if there's a human law that says you should only have one wife, which is the law of the land in the U.S., then you have to obey that law because it does not contradict God's law. Yeah. But it should be written in our hearts. It should be written in our hearts. So today we covered, hey, is it okay if I can do this? Hopefully I won't get asked that question anymore. Hey, hey preacher, is it okay that I can X, Y, Z? Because my answer is going to be back, what's the standard say? What does the Bible say? Is the action that you're trying to do, is it loving? Is it kind? Or is it rude and is it boastful? Because even something like creating a business plan done in the wrong way is a sin. And so as you go forth this week, let's all do those things that are loving and kind.